Well, welcome to another week of Digging Deeper. It is so good to have you with us today. I'm Pastor Andrea, and today I'm joined by Pastor Peter and Pastor Isaac. Thank you for being here with us. Not everybody may know you, Isaac. You are pastor of young adult ministry.
Yes.
You lead our Yammers.
That's right. Yeah, 18, post-high school, 18 to 29-year-olds.
Right.
But we really don't turn anyone away. So all you young at heart out there that
right.
want to come hang out, you can. But yeah, it's a joy. I love that group, and we've got a pretty sweet community.
You
so
do.
I love my job.
Yeah, you do.
That's awesome. And you've been at NMC how long?
So right around 5 years is when my wife Lydia and I came on staff.
Uh-huh.
So it'd been 2021.
But you did SOAR prior to that?
Yes, but we both did SOAR. So I did SOAR back in 2019. She did SOAR in 2020. And then they invited us back to come on staff through the residency program, and then we've stayed. They just you can't get rid of us.
We can't.
Yeah. So it's been about 5 years-ish.
Yeah. And we are not looking to kick you out the door. We want you around. So
Nice.
you're a true blessing to this community. So
Well, thanks.
Well, as we talked about last week, Peter, we're trying something new on the podcast, allowing our listeners to email us questions.
Yes.
So if any of you who are listening have a question, you can email it to nmc@nmc.church, and we will try to respond to that here on this podcast. It could be a question related to the message on Sunday or to things that we say in the podcast.
Sure.
And we really only got one question this week, right? What was it, Peter?
I had one question. If you saw the message, I AI photoed the lead team, and there was a rock band version and a doo-wop band version, and there was a boy band version. And I had one question asked: when we will be performing? So that was the one question, and the answer is never.
Never.
So, never.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think so, unless if Tim gets those sleeve tattoos, maybe we'll start talking about it.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think that's happening.
I don't think that's happening
I think
anytime soon
I think we're
either.
good to go.
Yeah.
So the whole point of those pictures was that you hang around people long enough,
Sure.
you start to,
Yeah, that God changes our community,
Yes.
that He, His grace, Acts chapter 4, starts to give us identity. He starts to shape our community. So, we
Right.
start to take on certain characteristics, preferably of Christ, but also of one another.
of one
Yeah.
another as we reflect Christ.
Yeah.
So silly question, but if you could look like anyone or like act like anyone in your life, not Jesus, we all know Jesus, like he's the Sunday
That's
school
the-
answer.
Yeah, that's the
That's the
A+
given.
answer. Yeah.
Who would you look like or act like?
You have an answer? I had two thoughts come to mind.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You take it
Well,
away.
and it's only based on fashion.
Okay.
Upper elementary, 6th grade, parachute pants were the big deal.
Very cool.
Like breakdancing, parachute
Yeah.
pants.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a break dancer, so I had to have the look. We had a break dancing segment in my PE class. I
Okay.
thought I was amazing. Then, like eighth grade or so, I had Jordan 1s, like the Air Jordan 1s. Like I wanted to be like Mike.
Yeah.
So those were the first two thoughts
So you
that I
wanted
had.
to bust a move.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to bust a
On the court.
move. Yeah, and
Yeah.
parachute pants, doing the, some moves on a slab of cardboard out
Yeah.
in the driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting, like, who would I want to look like? That's tough. I'm not a
sound
big,
like, or-
yeah, sound like maybe easier.
Uh-huh.
Look like I'm not a big style guy. My wife buys me a lot of clothes when she goes thrifting at Goodwill, which I love.
That's awesome.
I do think there's a couple guys here, young guys on staff, like Landon Weldy, Foo. They've got some cool style. They wear the grandpa sweaters and the, baggy jeans.
Who also has those Crocs that are
the Lightning McQueen.
Lightning McQueen Crocs.
Yeah.
I'm gonna recommend no on those Crocs.
I
Foo
will
can get away
say-
with those, but I don't know if anybody else.
No, I agree. I will say one item in Foo's closet that I would steal, and he would never give it up. It was something from his dad's. It was an old '90s Bulls jacket
Yeah.
that is super retro and cool.
Yeah.
It's the starter jacket.
Yes,
Starter
and
brand.
it's sweet. So
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a couple items. I try to keep it pretty simple
Yeah.
in my wardrobe. I think Peter and Tim have some great style. This is actually Tim's shirt that he gave me.
Well, there you go. That's awesome.
So shout out, Pastor
Shout
Tim.
out to
Well,
Tim
Yeah.
and his clothing.
Yeah, I love it.
In all the places that I've ever worked, like after you work with somebody long enough, like you have these days where you show up and you're like, we're both wearing the same thing.
Right. Yeah,
like
for
how does
sure.
that happen?
Yeah.
But it does. So the whole point being that we should be with Jesus enough that
Right,
we're
exactly.
reflecting him
Yeah.
that we sound like him, that we look like him. So the one phrase that keeps coming back to my mind from Sunday's message, and you said it multiple times, that Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And so as I've reflected on the message, that's one of the things that I keep processing through, and the hope that's in that, to think about who Christ is in our lives. And I also think that maybe it should have another phrase thrown in between Christ is risen and Christ will come again, is that Christ is seated. That like currently right now in this moment, that's the place that he plays in our lives. So that was one of my big takeaways. Isaac, how about you? Like, what did you take away from Sunday's message? What are you still processing?
Yeah, I think for me, in a similar vein of thought, like the emphasis on the fact that we are resurrection people, and Christ's resurrection, specifically, like Christ has risen, is the thing that unites us and is the like most basic foundation of our faith. Like you gave the example, like it'd be worthless, or from 1 Corinthians, I think, like the preaching is worthless and so is your faith, right? Like we should just all get up and leave, stop listening to this podcast, right? Like if Christ did not rise from the dead, but he did. C.S. Lewis, my imagination has been stirred recently. We just started reading the Chronicles of Narnia as a young adult ministry in our book club. We started a book club. And anyway, C.S. Lewis has a lot to say about imagination, a lot to say about fairy tales. He obviously wrote one himself. But that fairy tale, the Chronicles of Narnia, is based on, like, it is an allegory for Christianity, for like the Christian faith. And so my thoughts have just been stirred, I guess asking myself, like, do I live like Christ has risen from the dead? Like, does my life, do my actions, does my faith reflect a reality where people can come back to life once they die? Because I think that often I don't think about that all the time. I don't live like that. But like our reality as those who are in Christ, who know, who choose to believe in that fact, it means that like miracles happen, and we live kind of in a fairy tale world, right? Where happy endings take place because Jesus has come back to life. So I don't know, my imagination has been stirred around that fact of like resurrection is a reality. Resurrection is true, and it does happen. And so what does that shift? How does that shift my day-to-day living then as someone who just goes about this touch and feel world knowing that dead people can be made alive? So I don't know, that's the thoughts.
Right.
And the early church, the early Christian writers, I was just hearing this again this week since my sermon even, like Daniel talks about this one who will come, the Son of Man who will come. For them to say there is this resurrection, like he is the Messiah, he's the one who was promised, he's the one who's seated above all authorities, he's seated at the right hand of God the Father, he is above the angels, he's above all other principalities. That's tied deeply to the roots of our faith in Judaism in the Old Testament. So when Luke writes that in there and they're preaching the resurrection, that's a big thing. It's kind of blowing their imagination. Like, wait, he's that one? He's the one that that has been told about? We have to wrap our mind around that. Okay, God has done this fulfillment, and it blows our imagination. Like, it's really good.
Yeah.
So, it's that big identifying factor.
Yeah. Peter, on Sunday, you never have time to preach everything that you study. So as I always ask, if you had more time, what else would you have shared?
Well, the one thing I talked a little bit about koinonia just for a moment. That's in there, like all the people shared what they had. Everything was in common. That's the word. Koinonia is common. We often talk about it. Fellowship has all these little layers. Fellowship or share, common, and that's a good thing. And then there's places, even in the book of Acts chapter 10, verse 15, God is this vision that Peter has of the sheet coming down out of heaven, the animals. He's like, take and eat. And he's like, no, I don't eat those things. And God says, don't call impure what I have made clean. And the word impure, so you can take good things and make them common, or common things can become good. So I was going to wrestle with koinonia in the sense of God takes our common faith and makes it good, or God takes our common possessions and does good with them, or there are things that he calls good and we call them not good by making them commonplace, or like we lower their value. Jesus said in Matthew, it's not what it's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. It's that common thing, that defilement. So there are good things that we make common, and God calls common things good. So I was going to wrestle back and forth. That'd be a whole different.
Yeah, it would.
But it's there's that.
I'd like to hear that
There's
message.
that duality of that word. The common things made good, or good things that we tend to make, we defile them, but
Right.
God calls them good. So I was going to wrestle with that and go that
Okay.
direction, and then I ended up going the direction I went.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Will you
maybe
preach-
another day.
Yeah, preach that message.
Okay,
someday.
I'll work on it.
That would be good.
Yeah.
So you also talked about grace, and that it has many faces. You talked about, we often think of it as being smooth, and maybe you use the word stylish, or I don't know if that's how I interpret it.
Graceful,
Yes.
eloquent. Grace
Yeah.
just kind of has that component to it.
Yeah.
It seems easy or accepted.
Right.
Yes.
And then you talked about grace as being powerful, and that it can move things and challenge systems, challenge things in our world. So let's talk about that word grace. In the original language, it's charis,
Charis,
right? And I think you defined it on Sunday as unmerited favor.
Sure. Yeah, that's one of it. Yeah.
And I looked it
Or
up as
divine
well.
influence
Yes.
is part of it. Yes.
Part of the definition in Strong's Concordance is that it's that which affords joy, pleasure, delight, sweetness, charm, loveliness, and grace of speech.
Yeah.
And I love thinking about those things coming on me in an unmerited favor sort of way, right? That's what the grace of God is. So what does grace look like, and how would you guys more fully define it?
Yeah. So as I was processing, this question, like the aspect of grace being both kind of a noun and a verb, right? Like grace is something given. Grace in and of itself is given, as a gift, or right, this gift of grace, and maybe we might be talking about salvation as a noun, but also grace in it itself has the power to change. Like it acts, like grace as the actor, as the thing doing the work, right, in us to transform us, to build community, like all the things you mentioned on Sunday. And so, even in my own life, reflecting on like the ways that I have experienced grace, whether it is just it's the grace of God in my day-to-day living, like those good things that I don't deserve. Like I don't necessarily deserve in and of myself to see a beautiful sunrise, but it's God's grace to me on a regular Tuesday morning, or this common grace that is among us.
Yes.
And then there's specific grace towards us who are transformed to be able to believe, right? Like it's God's grace at work in us that we can come to a moment of belief in Him, accepting the gift of grace of salvation, and then it's His grace at work to transform us. Like it's a transforming grace that makes us more holy and conforms us into the image of Jesus. And so, I think I have experienced and am experiencing that on a day-to-day basis. The understanding that grace is, always at work in my life, and it's not just, I don't just point to specific moments in the past as like, oh, that's when I experienced God's grace. It's like, I'm constantly under the grace of God.
Yes.
Like God is always acting in a gracious way towards me and for me in the good gifts that I experience day to day, in the blessings of my life, and obviously in the greater salvation and ultimately glorification with Jesus. So that's all all falls under the umbrella of grace, in my life.
And I think there are we have these grace-filled moments where we recognize it and we know that that's what's happening.
Right.
But how many moments throughout our day is God's grace resting upon us, and we have no clue of what He's just provided us? We're just oblivious, and we just get to live under that umbrella.
Yeah. You were given kind of, people call it the way of salvation, or all the different forms of grace, that grace that even gives you the opportunity to respond with faith. That's a grace, and justifying grace and sanctifying grace, and I love all those layers of grace. One of my favorites, and I pray it often. I pray it for people, pray it corporately. I believe the Holy Spirit goes before us. His grace goes before us. I pray that when I think about people I'm concerned for their salvation, or I'm concerned they're heading into a situation, I believe the Holy Spirit is at work in a situation before we arrive there. That's a preventing grace or a prevenient grace, it's called. But it's the grace that goes before. I love that attribute of God's grace, that he's already at work in a situation, or he's preparing. Like when we send teams out, we believe God's already active there. It's not like we're bringing God with us. He's at work. His grace is already there. Another one of the grace facets, like if it were a precious jewel or something, you turn and see different sides of it. Paul talks about grace in Romans 6. It's always been a convicting passage for me, but always an encouraging one. Shall we go on sinning that grace should more abound? And then he answers the question, by no means, no. Like, we shouldn't abuse grace. And so there's this we hold grace sacredly because we don't want to abuse it. I don't want to take advantage of God. There's a tendency, he writes about it a couple times in Romans, there's a tendency to be like, oh, good, I'm good to go with God, so I can just keep doing what I want to do.
Right.
That's an abuse of grace. It's a really firm term that he uses. He just really means like, God forbid you do that. Don't abuse grace, because it's such a gift. So those are a couple that I like, and I really like the whole sequence that you talked about.
Yeah.
That's good.
One of my favorite passages is 1 Peter 4:10, and it says this: each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And that's what we're talking about right now, the various forms of grace. And it blows my mind that God would want to use each of us to administer that grace to others in its various forms. And so, like on Sunday, you talked about grace as giving identity, building community, and empowering us. And again, each of those things feels like an invitation to me to join God in what he's doing in the world, right? To administer his grace. So let's talk a little bit about how grace builds community. Does this look the same for everyone? Like, can you go into that a little more fully?
Well, Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 4, they shared everything, they held everything in common. Sometimes there have been communities of faith who have done that. And even before Acts, like the Qumran community, maybe some people think John the Baptist was part of that. They're the ones who lived up in the hills and kind of with the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff. They lived with a common purse and a common community that gave all of their possessions. So Acts chapter 2, 4, that is replicated in other places, even in modern times, Jesus People USA, and there's been movements where like we're just collective. One of my favorite friends up in Michigan, this older fella, he's got the best name, Chuck Herpelsheimer. He and his wife and a number of a number of couples years and years ago put all their possessions together. They felt really stirred like by an Acts chapter 2 or Acts chapter 4. So, but I've also heard this kind of living in common faith and sharing all your possessions, that's described, not necessarily prescribed. What is prescribed is that there is community, that we do use our grace, like Peter says, to be a gift to one another. So how does that look? It may look like I'm selling something and giving it to you, or vice versa, but it's not necessarily mandated. But that does show the expression of I'm listening to your needs. Can I meet those needs? I think there's grace. Because I know that God's grace has met my needs and he's continuing to do that, I think that characteristic then he wants to develop in that, to say in us that I might be the kind of person that is looking for opportunities to meet needs, to extend grace to people, whether it be spiritual or discipleship oriented or real physical needs. So I think it's described, not prescribed, but the characteristics of we are leaning into one another. And we're trying to meet one another's needs. And Ananias and Sapphira, I didn't even get into that in chapter 5. They didn't have to sell their property that they're described as selling. They did, and then they lied about it. So there was this invitation to participate, to not abuse the grace of God, but they abused it. And there's trouble that comes to them, obviously, in a powerful way. But others, like Joseph, they called Barnabas, who will end up traveling with Paul later, he sold a field and gave it away, and it was graciously received. So there was this invitation to participate in the grace. So how it looks, I think, is invitational, not dogmatically prescribed, I suppose. That's what comes to my mind.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your thoughts. And as you were sharing, and especially the difference of like described, not prescribed. I don't know. And maybe this will rub people the wrong way, but I almost want to push back against that. I'm not disagreeing that it's described and not prescribed, but I would hate for us to use that as an excuse to not live like
for
that.
sure.
You know
the
what I mean?
principle is still there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we're told, hey, dude, you have to sell everything and give it to me. I don't
Yeah.
think that's being mandated.
Right.
But the principle of, dude, you better be like really generous with one another and look for one another and care for one another.
Extremely
Absolutely.
generous.
I agree with you
like,
there.
Right.
Yes.
Radically generous,
Yes,
right? And I
for
don't
sure.
I don't know that it would be the worst thing. And obviously I don't think through the economic consequences of it, but I don't know that it'd be the worst thing for us to like to lean into that, right? And then
Right. And
do radical acts of generosity in a similar way.
What's the transverse of that, or the opposite of that, is this radical selfishness.
Yeah, right. And they show it back to back.
They
You're
show
right,
it
like
back
Acts
to
4,
back.
Acts 5, yeah.
And so in our culture, you're making a great point. In our culture, what's the better way to live, with radical, crazy generosity, or I'll pretend I'm generous, or I'll hide some of it, or I'll be. So there's the principle of radical generosity is through and through.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the radical generosity that you talked about, they were daily being added to their number.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of my own life where I have to guard against wanting to be selfish with my time or with my people. Like, I don't want to add anybody else to this group because I'm comfortable, right? Like a small group, we just got comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think it goes beyond just financial generosity,
For sure.
right?
Yeah,
it could be
absolutely.
generosity in so many other ways.
Yeah.
And because the early church was generous in relationship, it added to their number daily. And it wasn't just because they were kind people. Like, they offered hope through Jesus Christ.
Yes.
But they were generous with that. It wasn't like, I found Jesus and I'm just going to keep him to myself.
Right.
They were radically generous in that way. And you mentioned Jesus People USA.
Yeah.
Have you ever Japooza? Have you ever heard of this, Isaac?
I have.
In
and actually
Chicago?
came up. A little bit. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I've heard of it.
I got to lead a youth trip there years ago to see it in action. A 10-story building where they pool all their resources. They really care for the city of Chicago well. Since 1972, they've been in operation. So, and I've known other people throughout my life, just like your friend, that they gather in community and they buy homes right next to each other, and they share lawnmowers and cars and all sorts of stuff. So there are so many different ways that it could look or it could be done. So
Yes.
yeah. So Peter, your final challenge to us was that grace empowers us to ask what else, who else, where else. So like how would you answer those questions? How would you encourage others to live with that, in that place of expectation every day of asking those things?
When I was preaching it, I mean, I'm an individual person. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. I'm a friend. So one of those my first circle was, how are things in my relationships? The who else was really, God, will you be gracious to me in some of the situations going on in my relational world? And so then I thought of our congregation. I thought all of the relational what ifs and the family what ifs, the household what ifs. Lord, would you restore grace there? Would you bring your grace there? Would you do something remarkable in my first ring of love, so to speak, the first people that I care with, even just in the sense of, a slight word or a disconnect between a husband and a wife, but then there's the long-term brokenness that happens in family systems. Who else? Lord, could you restore our family? So I was thinking relational with the who else, and I certainly, knowing our context, our deep desire to get it, to be deep in our community, to be deep in our region, to go global, to say, who are the who's that we're going. So my mind did go kind of big time as far as trips and partnerships. But my first mind set was the who was, boy, the people that I hold most dear. And then I was thinking of our congregation with the who. Yeah. Where did your mind go with some of that?
Right. I went a slightly different route. Like and this is just our, stage of life and, things that have happened. My wife and I just recently moved into a house that we bought, which has been great. But with that came an addition of a whole new group of neighbors. And so my heart has really been for them. Lydia and I were just on a walk just yesterday, actually. The weather was beautiful, and we were walking around our block and trying to name, who we knew. And just, again, like the thought of God's grace empowering us and us, we are now extensions of that grace. Like we carry that grace with us, both in the gospel that we present and the Jesus that we give, but then also just in the ways that we tangibly meet needs and extend love. And I think the most, like if you think about where it would go if I'm just one person, it actually extends from me. It'd be the people I rub shoulders with all the time, right? So my coworkers, my family, but then like the next stage is neighbors.
Yes,
like it's
around me.
Yes, like I walked past my neighbor grilling last night, and like I can extend grace to him. So as far as the who else, where else, like my neighborhood. So I don't know. Yeah, I've just been that's been on my heart and mind a lot. Is like how can I be a tool of grace for our neighbors who I'm certain that some know Jesus and some probably don't.
Sure.
And so I think that God empowers us and even encourages us, obviously, in the Great Commission, right? Like the first stages of the Great Commission going out was like in your communities. Like it was in Judea and Samaria and then to the ends of the earth. And so, and not to say we shouldn't go on trips, we should.
Of course.
But I think, man, for me right now, it starts in my neighborhood and with my neighbors.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
It gets me excited to be that tool of grace.
I have a book on my shelf called Sidewalks in the Kingdom, and it's all about, what's your territory?
Yeah.
Where are you walking? Who are you knowing?
Yeah.
Who are you connecting to? How are you extending grace? Building kingdom right here on the sidewalk.
Right.
Where you are.
Yeah.
I love that.
And as I was considering those questions, my mind went more to what you talked about, grace being powerful to move things, right? And I think I err on the side sometimes of the smooth or stylish grace, right? And forget about the power that is there. And so for me, it was a real challenge to say, Andrea, are you limiting the grace of God?
Good question.
Are you thinking that it looks this way with these people in this group in this time? Or are you sitting with the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, do exceedingly and abundantly more. Like, show me how you want me to move
That's really good.
In big ways and not relying on my own strength to administer God's grace in its various forms, but to lean into the Holy Spirit more than I have been doing. Like, I know how to be a kind neighbor. Does God want to stretch me further and take a step of boldness and, I don't know, invite somebody in or care for a need that I see, but they haven't asked for me to meet. How does God want to stretch me in that? So, as I ponder those questions, I think it's more the what else or the who else.
And as we talk, these passages are really about how they were getting along with one another, and they're going to struggle. I mean, even the next verses, the next chapters. How are they taking care of widows who are without? There's tension in the church. How are we taking care of each other? What's that grace look like? And as you spend time with each other, you're like, I don't know if I want to give any grace to them. There's that rough human side of us where you're like, I've been with them just about too much. And so that question of how do I give big grace to them? How's the power of grace going to move in me so that I extend grace to that person again, or go across the room to extend grace, or invite them into my place or my home or my group. They were wrestling with how do we do this as a community? The who else was that, what about us? How's God moving among us? And then it's going to push into the world.
One last thought on that, like our definition of grace, right, being like unmerited favor, and among the rest of the definitions that we gave, but like thinking through, like how can I be generous in my actions and love to somebody who doesn't deserve it? Because what it is, right? Like
Yes.
they did absolutely nothing to earn this or deserve it in any way. But I do it. I do it just because. Like I just am gracious because I love just because. And obviously, like, what a platform for the gospel, right? Like if I were to love a neighbor or fill in the blank with whoever that is, in a way that they recognize in themselves, like, I didn't deserve this at all. Like I didn't deserve for you to buy my cup of coffee today. I didn't deserve for you to come mow my lawn or, whatever it is. And they say, why did you do that? Like like I think that us acting as grace-filled people in gracious ways is just an automatic door. It just opens doors for the gospel, for God's grace to then move in that way. So, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think about what Scripture tells us about, this is my paraphrase, it's easy to love somebody who loves you back.
Yeah.
Right.
It's harder to love your enemy.
For sure.
And that's how people will really know that we're loving. It's when it's somebody who is against us, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of grace as well, when we're gracious towards those who don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Just like us with Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
I almost titled the sermon "The DNA of Grace" because I wanted to articulate that this it just has to get in us. It's what's given to us. It has to shape us. It becomes who we are.
Yeah.
I went with the question, what else can grace do? Because I thought grace does move us. It motivates us. It pushes us to the various relationship circles that we have. But yeah, I was wrestling with that.
Yeah.
The DNA, like this is who God is, and He imparts that to us and gives me grace. How am I going to let that become part of the fabric of my being so that I'm gracious to other people like He's been gracious to me?
Yeah,
We love because He first loved us.
Right.
Yeah, we grace because He first graced us. We
Yeah.
can say.
That's
Yeah.
good. So is there anything from this week's devotional that you've been pondering or considering?
I looked at, I was reading some other sources. John Stott, great Christian writer. I mean, as the text is moving through, and it's in this week's, there's this tension. There's violence coming at them outside. John Stott says it's not necessarily in your devotional, but this is pointed out. There's tension on the inside. There's lying with this couple in Acts chapter 5, and then and I mentioned it already. There's he calls it a distraction. The widows who are not getting their daily portion or whatever. And it could become almost a distraction. The disciples or the apostles say, we're going to teach, but we're also going to take care. So they handled what could have been a distraction or a side swipe so well. The other thing I took out of the devotional was boldness, just the boldness of the early church. That was the theme that's transmitted through these early chapters, and it was picked up in our devotional. Just their boldness to continue to proclaim Christ, His resurrection, continue to love one another. It's bold. It's ridiculous, and it's good.
Yeah.
That is good.
My only thought goes from today, week 2, day 2, but it's talking about the boldness in Acts 5. When the apostles are thrown in prison and then they end up getting released and told not to proclaim the gospel anymore, and they leave rejoicing because they were counted. What does it say in verse 41? Right, they left the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for the name of Jesus. And the reminder, and this goes to our last thoughts of like, we love because He loved us. We're gracious, because God was gracious to us. Like, we rejoice in suffering because that's the pattern laid down by Christ. Like they were counted worthy to be, equal in a way to their Savior, like to Jesus. They would have been the ones that remembered His teachings from the Sermon on the Mount, right? Where He says, like, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you.
Right.
They've done it to the prophets
they've
before
done it,
you.
and they've done it at that
me.
point.
Right.
Yeah, right. They're
Right.
going to do it to me. And so, and then the repeated reminder throughout the New Testament that like there's joy in the midst of suffering, like because of who Jesus is, like because we get to identify with Him, because of the hope that He has now laid before us because of His suffering. Like, we can now rejoice. We can count, as Paul says in Philippians, count all things as loss for the sake of knowing Christ. Like, we can count it all joy, as James says, when we suffer trials of various kinds because Jesus did, and that's the model He laid down. And so to see the apostles live that out in Acts 5, to reflect on that, how do I, and again, some of the questions from the devotional of like, how do I respond to trials? How do I respond to push back in my faith, even in just like very little ways? Like it has you pondering, like where do you tend to back down from moments of conflict in your life, and what would it look like maybe to proclaim the gospel boldly in those areas? In hard ways. Yeah, and so it's just a good, I don't know, just good processing that came from the devotional, and I was glad to be reminded that I should and can. I've been given the grace to count trials and suffering as victory and as joy because of Christ.
For sure.
Yeah, and that was convicting for me as well, because I think growing up in America, living in America, it's often seen as the opposite, right? Like, I'm suffering. How dare you? Don't you know who my father is? Don't you know that I have this right? So to be able to pause and go, I should count this as joy, and I should rejoice when these things come my direction. So coming up this Sunday, Peter, Pastor Gabe is in the pulpit.
That's right.
And do you know what he is speaking on?
He's going to take us to the familiar character who's first called Saul, who becomes Paul. And we'll get into that. So he's going to be talking about his conversion, his encounter with Christ. The resurrected Christ appears to Saul, Acts chapter 9, and the response that he has, and then a response that we can have as well. That's where he's going.
So if people want to get a jump start, you said Acts 9?
Saul's story.
8, 9.
Keep reading. You get through 8 because he's starting to be referenced there. 7, 8, 9. He's in that, but 9 in particular, his conversion.
Okay, that's great. And also coming up on Sunday, I'm really excited about this. Our Pick and Go display is returning to the Grand Hall. I don't know if our listeners remember. Maybe some of our listeners weren't even around, but it's an opportunity for individuals, for families, for small groups to find a need in our community. We have gathered the needs together. It's an easy way to go pick 1 or 2 cards and fulfill that need. And I remember last year, one of the cards we took as a family was for the Croc Center in South Bend, and they needed jars of peanut butter and toilet paper, and like there were probably 3 or 4 things listed there, like take these things to the Croc Center. So when we went and dropped everything off, there were other bags that looked just like ours. It was peanut butter and toilet paper and baby wipes, I think, were maybe the 3 things. And I had this internal moment of going, we just did this as a community. Like, other NMCers had a similar card and brought similar things. If people were from outside of NMC, they were looking at the Croc Center website, and that probably had 25 different things to bring, right? So it was just really exciting to see it, to know I was doing it in community. And then I loved standing in the Grand Hall on a Sunday morning and watching, whether it was families or small groups or friend groups, stand around that display and dialogue about what are we going to do together.
Yeah, which one could we do? Can we afford this? Or do we have time to go here? Do we know? And make a connection. It's really good.
So that's coming on Sunday.
It'll be there Sunday. Yeah, and all the way through Easter.
Correct.
Like it'll take us
through
the
this entire
rest of this series. It'll take us up to Easter.
Yeah. So listeners, be looking for that on Sunday morning. I also want to encourage you, if you haven't jumped into the devotional yet, it's not too late to start that. We're reading through the book of Acts, and we've heard throughout this series already and in other platforms, other series that we've done, like, it doesn't matter if you're behind or if you sit there and you're like, I'm just not getting it today. Like, it's the discipline of showing up and being with Jesus, spending time with him, and putting your heart in a posture to receive something from him. So if you are reading the devotional and you're feeling like, I didn't get anything deep today, that's okay. God is faithful. He has met with you. He cares for you, and we want you to keep engaging in that way. So thanks for being with us today. We look forward to connecting with you again next week, and we hope to see you on Sunday.